and students across the campus talking about our experiences, our lives, not just at this campus, but in higher education, in life in general. So it's almost one of those experiences where if you've never known what it's like to be a fly on the wall, this is your opportunity to sort of be a fly on the wall and listen to a conversation that you may not have been invited into on a regular basis, but it's a good conversation. Take from this conversation and learn from this conversation. What do you take from this conversation? How do you feel listening to this conversation? Pay attention to those kinds of things as you're listening to what we're talking about here today. So just to be clear, all of us are affiliated with GCC in some form or fashion, whether we're a student, a former student, or a current student, faculty, staff, in some way, shape, or form, right? So you won't be able to actually have your questions answered in this moment. We are going to talk about questions. You can pose them, but it doesn't mean we'll get a chance to interact with you. So this is just a chance to hear us. So you won't be able to just comment or throw in a question that we'll address during the conversation. But keep those questions in mind, because we will have a survey that's going to be posted in the chat. If you haven't seen it yet, it will pop up. You'll see a link pop up in the chat to where you can have a chance to put those questions in there or talk about something that you wanted to hear about, right? So we're going to try to have this conversation be one that we can extend beyond this time with different groups across the campus over time, right? But that'll pop up. We'll also be sending out that survey after the session as well. And for those students that are here that might be trying to get extra credit or something, make sure in the chat that you put in you can put in your school email, your name, and we will randomly draw 3 people from that. And those 3 people will also be winning a $10 Amazon gift card. So you're going to get something out of it, whether it's just credit, but you might get credit as well as a $10 gift card. So I would encourage you to put your name in the chat. That will be saved from this session. This session will also be recorded so that you'll be able to access it later. If you want to replay it or learn more, we'll have it in different places on the GCC website, including the diversity website webpage as well. I also want to mention that if you want to see us we're trying to make sure that you're able to see us in a panel so you can see everyone. However, if there's difficulty where you cannot see us, you can go in the upper right corner and you can put panel view up so that you're able to see all the panelists, or you're able to pin whomever you want to hear at any particular time as well. Okay? We want to thank you for the opportunity for us to be here to speak to you all, not necessarily to you all, but for you all to be able to hear us speaking about our experiences. But I want to encourage the panelists to also be blunt, be honest, be open. Don't be afraid, be unapologetic as you speak. But before we get started, I want to have everyone go through and at least give you their name, how they're affiliated with GCC, so that you have some kind of familiarity with us. Again, I'll start. I'm a faculty in social sciences. This is my 5th year here at GCC. I'm from Louisiana, a very different place from Arizona, and I've been letting Arizona grow on me. So I just want to throw that out to you all. And I'll pass the torch. Anybody else, feel free to go at any point.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tanisha Baca, and I am currently Faculty Senate President. I am also communication faculty at GCC. I've been faculty for several years now. But one thing that I am also is that I'm actually a former student of GCC. So I love GCC. I've been a part of GCC for a long time, and I'm really looking forward to our panel on today. So thank you for coming.
Hey everyone, welcome. This is Elisa Cooper. I teach in the English department here at GCC. I've been here forever, it seems like. I teach freshman composition, African American literature, and a journalism course. And I'm glad you are joining us today.
Hi everyone, my name is Abel. I am a student at GCC. I've been attending here for over 3 years, majoring in computer science. I also work at the Career Services, and I'm president of GCC Student Government. I'd just like to say I'm very excited for this panel.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sage, and I am a full-time student here at GCC. I've been here for 2 years. I'm enrolled in the Sound Audio Technology program. I am a singer and songwriter, and I also create jingles and commercials. Um, I currently also working in the enrollment center as a student ambassador for the past year or so, as well as having the great pleasure of doing receptionist work in the English faculty department with David Miller. And I must say I'm having a great experience here. It's the first time I've been in college since I graduated from high school in the 80s. So it's rewarding and exciting. And GCC is a major part of my life. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tanika Smith. I'm going to be a panelist today. This is my second year at GCC. Not second year, my apologies. This is my second semester at GCC. I'm majoring in art, emphasis on Japanese. This is my first time as a panelist and participating in something like this, so I look forward to it. I'm hoping this will be a rewarding experience. I'm looking forward to a good talk. And thank you guys for coming.
Hello, everyone. My name is BFA. I was once a former GCC student, and now I work and I have my own business. And I'm so excited to be part of this. I think this will be a great discussion for us to have and to fully express ourselves, how we feel, and yeah, I'm looking forward to hear what everybody else has experience regarding this topic issue.
Hey y'all, my name is Justina Burks. Work here at the Student Leadership Center on campus, and I've been with GCC since January of this year, and am excited for this conversation. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here.
Thank you all. I did want to make one more announcement that whenever you put your name and your email in the chat, make sure you put your teacher beside that. That way we know which teacher to send the list to so that they know that you are present as well. And as you know, all your mics are also muted for anybody who's not speaking, just so that we can avoid any feedback. Just try to keep yourself muted whenever you're not actually speaking. I also wanted to throw out there, if you have any technical issues, make sure you put it in the chat. That way, hope we have tech people that are helping us, that maybe we can help address some of those issues for you, okay? So I want to throw this first question out there to the panel. And of course, don't feel like you have to speak on every single question. Speak on the ones that speak to you the most, you know, or if you have something to share, feel free to share it. But when did you first notice or realize your race or ethnicity? What made you realize that, and at what point in your life?
I could definitely jumpstart this question. I feel like for me, I became aware in elementary school, probably like maybe the third or fourth grade. I became aware of it because unfortunately I had a negative experience with two other classmates who unfortunately said some really negative, derogatory things to me because of the color of my skin. You know, things like go back to Africa and some really horrible, horrible things when I was really young. And I didn't understand at the time why they were being so mean. And I just remember crying and having to, you know, talk to the principal and the teachers about it, and then also talking with my parents. So that's when I kind of first became really aware because at the time, that experience, I was so young, I didn't really understand it at the time. So I eventually, over time, I kind of understood it a little bit later, but that was when I became really aware that, you know, I'm in the eyes of other people, I'm seen differently. So that's kind of where my first experience really started. That's where I really became aware. For me, it was elementary school.
I think.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Abel.
Okay. I would say similar to Tanisha, I also became aware when I was in elementary school. I came here as a refugee from Nairobi, Kenya, and I would also get those negative comments towards me, you know, like go back to Africa, you know, comments about my skin color. And so it was at that point that I realized, that, this is my ethnicity.
I was just going to add that, I grew up in the Midwest in Ohio, and, it was really segregated in the city that I lived in. So, I grew up most of my young years just seeing all Black people because that's just who was in the neighborhood. And it wasn't until probably junior high that, and I'm going to really show how old I am, that I experienced segregation, where I was actually bused out of my all Black neighborhood to an all white school. And I never thought anything. I thought, oh, this, it's got to be a good school. This is going to be fun. And it was a rude awakening that not only was I shipped away from most of everything I knew, but the people that I had to go to school with didn't really appreciate us sort of invading their school. So it's sort of like this forced recognition of, we're different and not everybody is appreciative of that.
I think like I was always aware, but I didn't realize basically because I didn't experience until possibly middle school. Like I always had like I watched the movies and shows, but like I never actually experienced it. But like I heard my cousins talking about the differences in the schools that they went to, but it wasn't until I think like I was in fifth grade when I was like the only Black kid in the all Latina Latino classroom, and they found out I had asthma. And so like all I heard was, "Oh, the Black kid over there has asthma. The Black kid over there has asthma," and everything else was in Spanish. And then I was like, okay, that was probably just my medical condition. And then I went to middle school. Like the kids were always talking about there was a racist teacher that was like next to our class. But I thought like, well, they're kids. They probably are just like making up rumors, and so I didn't think nothing of it. And so like I did notice that like there was a white kid who had his pants all the way down to his knees, and then like there was a Black kid who only had it like halfway where his boxers were showing, and then she walks past the white kid and tell him, "You need to pull up your pants." And I'm like, okay, she probably didn't see it, but I'm like at the same time in the back of my mind, how did she not see that? Until one day it was really windy and I just opened the door and it slammed, and she said, "You go to the principal's office." And so me, I was like, fine, I'll go to the principal's office. And then like me, I was like a little bit petty. And so like once she got reprimanded by the office, I sort of did it on purpose, just a couple of times, just to vent my frustration. But then like I realized, wow, like there is basically racism out there, like, but like at the same time, I didn't let it I vented it out so it wouldn't get to me, so I wouldn't build up so much hate and frustration because I know everyone's not like that. And then it's probably because they have lack of understanding, and she was an older lady, so it probably basically was basically like built in her, and so she couldn't have that capability of changing, and that's just how the way she was. And so I just like somewhat somehow forgave her after a couple of, I guess, like a 2 years after going to that school. And then and then I just started to notice it more after that. So
Tanika, thank you, because you bring up a very important question that not necessarily one of the ones I was thinking about, but you brought up something. You said that not everybody is like that. How do you navigate who is like that and who is not when it constantly happens to so many different people and you wonder whether or not it's going to happen to you next, right? Um, it was just one of those things that pops into my head, because we have to go through this world and we have to keep telling ourselves, not everybody's like that. But yet we keep seeing things happen. How do you all handle those moments where you have to figure out whether or not somebody is like that, whether they meant to do or say whatever it is that they said, or they may not have even known, or you tell yourself, maybe they just don't realize that what they said was offensive. How do you do that?
I actually had a friend like that. she like she's Salvadorian, and so we used to work at at a warehouse, and so like she has something to say about everyone, like basically. And then like she was like mainly about Oriental. And then she asked me, "Do you think I'm racist?" I was like, "Well, you do have a lot to say." And she just really doesn't realize that. And so like I was taking her to church, and she basically realized it, and she's trying to reflect herself. And then basically again, it's just that like that prejudice, and they don't know why they're prejudiced. It's just something built into them, and sometimes they don't realize it. Sometimes they do, but like sometimes you don't. And she did have a lot to say about black people, but I was like her black friend, and like she tells me everything, and we're close, and she never basically like insulted me. And then when she did say something, like because she started being aware, she was like, "Oh, did I offend you?" And I'm like, "No, not really." Because I'm the type of person that like if like the N word, I feel like no one should say that. And so like basically I just think it's a bad word. And so if black people are saying it, of course the white people are gonna follow, or basically other races are gonna follow and say what they hear, because that's just basically the natural things, the natural how people are. They hear things and they want to comment on it or repeat it.
Go ahead. Anybody else feel like adding anything else to that? And feel free to definitely jump back to the other question too. I don't mean to like cut it off, just so you all are aware.
Yeah. I just wanted to say really quick too that I think a lot of times when it's not a big deal that we tend to want to just ignore it and just let it pass because, you know, is it our responsibility to always have to say something and to, you know, to be on top of it? And I think that is part of the problem, is that if so many of us are just being very passive about some of these comments or things that happen because we don't want to deal with it at the time, I think a better approach, especially now that I feel like we've gotten to the point where everyone's just fed up, that if we all just take a moment or two to address some of these things, it's like the, you know, the little jokes that you hear and people just kind of laugh and move on. But now I think it's a better approach if we sort of address some of these things, like Tanika was saying, you know, say, yeah, that is a little offensive to me, and maybe that is a racist statement, and I think it's helpful to do that.
Yes. My first, I would say, my first realization. Well, first of all, I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and I grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood, and it was a great neighborhood for us Black African American children, and the schools. I would say that that's, you know, I knew a little bit about that because of some of our white teachers. So we were all predominantly Black in the schools, the public school, the junior high school, and high school. But for some reason, we mostly had white teachers. And sometimes we were very, very misunderstood. And, you know, there was a culture barrier, and there was a lot of things. We always had the white teachers and the principals and the staff, and everyone else, you know, was Black. But it's also, I knew a little bit about this because of the dynamics of uh, growing up in Bed-Stuy, the community, and having a supreme rulership like over us, and someone was in charge of our finances, our homes, our schools, our organizations, and just our restoration uh, entities, just everything in every aspect. And so that's how I knew that there were issues. Now my major thing, when I really realized it, when I had my real first like dig, was my great grandmother is from Greenville, South Carolina. And ever since I was 8 or 9 years old, I would take that Greyhound bus and have to travel so many million miles down there to help her because she was illiterate in certain areas, and she needed help. So I'm the middle child, and you know, I was always the one to go down there. So when I went to, on many occasions, my great grandmother did days work, they called it, and she worked for a white family. Now, let me show you the difference in this that the other young lady was speaking about. She worked for some very nice people. And in particular, she worked for this couple who had two young children, maybe about one's 3, a boy's 3, and maybe the daughter was about 5 or 6. And they really highly loved and respected my great grandmother. And so they called me Bridges, and they would take me occasionally with them different places while my grandmother worked, and they would take me along with them. Now, on one this particular time is that they took, which was such a fabulous thing. I was so excited because they took me to see a choo-choo train. A real live choo-choo train. I was ecstatic. And so we had a wonderful time. And this family was so sweet and so loving and so nice and kind, this white couple and their children. But the incident that happened was when we went for lunch at the Howard Johnson. I would never ever forget it in my life. When we walked into the Howard Johnsons, the look on the faces of the staff, the customers, and just everyone, because it was all totally a white establishment. And this white family, how dare them come in here with this Black child? And they were absolutely appalled. You know, the looks and the stares and the disgust. I mean, there's so many words I can't even describe. I felt it to the core of my heart. I was like, oh, it was so okay. I was like, what is this? You know? And the loving couple, they try to overlook it. They act like everything is good. We're going to get our food and we're going to eat and so on and so forth. And we are not going to allow them to discriminate us, or especially you, in our presence, you know. And I felt the love from them, and I felt the hate from everyone else that was around. And it was really, really my first, and it was an experience that never left me. I didn't even want to eat, and they did not want to serve me. So it was a long time before we got served. And when I got that in me, I was like, wow. So I already had the pros and the cons. These are great, loving people. They were always very nice to me and the other families that my grandma worked for. But on the other outside, also when I would go to, she would send me to Winn-Dixie and I could get her favorite soft drink was Coca-Cola, and my favorite thing was chocolate ice cream. And so she said, Bridget's going up to Winn-Dixie. You can go and get my Coca-Cola and go over yonder. It was her always, everything was over yonder. We go over yonder and get this and that and other. And I would say, I'm getting my ice cream. Okay, yeah, my chocolate ice cream. And so I would find similar racism with the cashiers and with the people. And they're like, how dare this child be in here wandering around and making purchases? So that was in Greenville, South Carolina. That it was major, and that was my most the first time that I really realized that harshly. Thank you for allowing me to share that.
No, thank you. Thank you. I mean, it's a tough subject. I'll share a little bit too, not just moderate, but I grew up in the South where everybody says yonder. And actually, I worked at Winn-Dixie as well when I was young, you know. But growing up in the South, you see a lot of Black people. You know, we have a long history there. So we're used to each other. I didn't feel my race until I moved out west. And I'm not talking about to Arizona. I went to school at UC Riverside as well in California. And this was during grad school, so we had smaller classes. For those of you that plan on going to grad school, you will have typically very small classes. So in the class, giving presentations, I actually had a student. I was one of 2 Black students start in that program with that year, and students told me that I was smarter than he expected people like me to be. Okay. Mind you, I'm in my 20s at this point. I had already graduated from college, so I've never felt this, but I went to college in the South first. So, and then at the end of the semester, when I gave my final presentation, I had the professor ask where I was just after I gave the presentation. So of the 2 Black students you have in the class, you don't know the difference between us? That's a problem for me, you know? So that was probably the first time that I really, really began to feel it. And I was in my early 20s at that time. Of course, you know, from time to time, you still feel it here and there, but it does happen. But with that, I do want to ask, are there any other isms that interact with your Blackness? What I mean by that, have any of you faced anything like colorism? How does colorism impact your life? Maybe you're part of the LGBT community, or you're a woman, a female, you know, how does that or maybe you have a disability or something like that. Are there any other things that impact you along with your Blackness? Of course, feel free to talk about the other questions as well. I just want to throw more out there for us to get a chance to chat about.
Yeah, for me, it's primarily like where my origin, coming from the Congo. So it's always been associated with the gorillas. Granted, I never even seen a gorilla in my life until I came to this country. But when I moved to this country, it's the first thing person will ask me after they hear me speak is like, "Where you from?" I'm like, "The Congo." And they're like, "Oh, wow." So the gorilla associated me with Tarzan. So that used to always impact how I kind of like made me feel dishonored and shame about where I came from. To a point when I was in middle school, I used to claim that I'm from France because my name is being fair, I couldn't speak French. So I still like literally the pushing away from where I'm usually from just because to avoid that negativity and the shameful that you're black, you look like a gorilla, look at your lips and all that stuff. So it was really, really hard like growing up in America. That's just because of that where I'm from. And granted, this wasn't just coming from like other other ethnicity or race. This was also coming from sadly enough from my own people as well, sadly enough from my own brothers and sister, and that was really what even hurt even the most because I thought like, oh, when you see people who kind of look like you tend to gravitate towards them, so you feel like I was feeling okay. I'm gonna go over there. I see my people. I'm gonna hang out with them, and then they're the ones who were making fun of me, and that really struck the nerve. It's more like it identified me. Yeah, you're black, but you're not really black, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. That was actually going to make me throw another question out there. How do you reconcile being black but being different from people who grew up in this culture as black? Did we lose you? Or were you able to hear me, Ben Fay? We'll come back to that question. I'm not exactly sure if you could hear me at that point, but anybody else, feel free to jump in with any other issues that interact with Blackness or, something like as simple as colorism. As I remember, Abel, you said something that people at some point it impacted you about the color of your skin.
Definitely. So I would say for me, in my culture, everybody's either brown skinned or black skinned. And for me being albino, I usually tend to stand out. And so throughout my life, whether it's in Africa or here, I've always had people ask me, aren't you supposed to be black? And so I always have to throw out that little spiel of no, I'm albino because of my pigmentation on my skin. And so it just kind of gets repetitive. And even when my cultures have celebrations, it's very hard because I feel out of place. And so just kind of learning to deal with that, saying like just ignoring those comments and going about my day, if that makes sense. But throughout my life, it's definitely something that I have had to deal with.
I'm going to jump in. So on my end, I guess the colorism comes in on kind of other people wanting to know what I am. Like, what are you? You mixed? What? Who? I'm black, and it's and what else? And so it kind of takes that identity away from me, or it feels like an attempt to take that identity away from me, even though I yes, there are a mix of other cultures and races in my bloodline. I stand firmly in my blackness, and it's when it's and what else, and for me, it's depending on where other people are from is what they feel I'm mixed with. So if Sage might account for this. Some people from New York will say, "Oh, are you Puerto Rican?" Or if I'm, people from Florida will come up to me and say, "Oh, are you mixed with Cuban?" Or there's other real interactions that, you know, I'm a Black American and this is who I am. And so that constant kind of asking of, well, where are you from? Who else are your people? It kind of really tries to take that identity away from me.
One of the things that I notice, you know, studying people is that we can appreciate diversity in other animals, but we don't necessarily appreciate the diversity that comes along with us being human. We don't look the same way that other animals have such a huge variety. But when you look different from what we've already put in our head, something else must be impacting what that difference is. But the beauty of Blackness is that we come in all different shades. Have not paid attention to us around the world. We come in so many different shades, but that is something that's difficult sometimes for people to figure out how to navigate around that. What are you? Or whether or not we have the same parents because our siblings look different from us. You know, I have two sisters and a brother. My brother looks like me. One sister's darker than I am. One sister is very fair complexion. And people constantly try to figure out whether or not we have the same parents. We say, what? Yes, we do. You know, but even if we didn't, there's a whole history that goes along with that. It doesn't mean that we're any less related to one another. You know, we grew up around each other. But thinking about that, thinking about all of the different shades that we come in, what's one of the proudest things that you have in your history about being Black? You know, we think about all the negative, but let's think about something that also makes us proud. I love the fact that we come in different shades. That's probably one of our best qualities to me. We can look like a surprise.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm also most proud of my ethnicity and my Blackness because we come from the motherland of Africa, a very rich intellectual, cultural continent, and also we're builders of the pyramids, you know, that still stand today, and the all the artifacts and everything. And so we see it all around the European countries, you know, and that's the only chance we really get to see it in like museums and stuff like that, you know, because it was excavated. But so when I come to find those things out, because we weren't really taught that in school and so on and so forth, when I really found out who I really was, where I really came from, and the great, wonderful mass of people, of other Black people represent the deep culture, and we're very loving, kind people, and cooking and sharing and dancing and singing and you know, that kind of thing. And I'm so very proud to be a part of that great culture and heritage. So that's my thing.
I just wanted to add, you know, I was listening to Justina talk about how she's Black, and you know, it's difficult for people to look at us, like you say, Alex, that we're all different. We come in different shades. And I think that that's makes people curious, and it makes me curious. So when I see somebody, you know, I look at Tanisha and I say, she's lighter than me. I want to know what her background is. Not that it matters, but it's almost like you can't even ask anymore. I mean, and a lot of times people don't really know how to ask. You know, what are you? Clearly is not the right question to ask. What's your background? Where are you from? All of these questions are hit or miss, and it has a different reaction for each person who gets that question. If you're the person who gets asked all the time, like Abel was saying, he's tired of that question, he doesn't want to hear it anymore. Whereas another person might look at it as an opportunity to share their history and their background. I mean, I don't know what I am. I'm just a mutt, but clearly I'm not all African because I'm not as dark as some Africans. So I don't have a story to share, but others do. I have 10 nieces and nephews that are half Black, my brother, and have something else. And they're all just beautiful. And I know their background and I know their history, but I think it's something that they should share. I mean, if they're half Mexican and half Black and all you see is Black, I really feel that's not fair to that other half, you know, or a quarter or whatever they might be.
That's I'm sorry, go ahead, Abel.
Sorry, I was gonna say I agree with that. Even though for me sometimes it gets exhausting to answer that question, I think it is something that we should ask more often. I know sometimes whenever I see people of color, especially if they have an African accent, I'm always curious as to where they come from. I always look for other fellow Kenyans, and if they say they speak Swahili, I get very excited and I want to know more about them. So I think it's okay to ask other people, just a matter of how you're asking. Asking more about curiosity and just getting to know and understand them rather than just asking, oh, just to know or judge.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. You bring up the importance of communication. We don't teach people how to communicate about difficult topics. We've created a society that has it's become difficult for us to talk to each other because we're easily offended by things. So it's important for, even if you're on the receiving end, maybe to restructure or reword the question or throw it back at the person to truly understand where they're coming from before we respond to them. Because many times we'll respond to them and they really didn't mean any harm by it. They just didn't realize that the way that they presented the question might have been offensive. So in those moments, if we could take a moment to say, maybe it wasn't intended the way that I understood it, but to throw it back at the person just to clarify before you respond, because we don't. As soon as we're offended, we usually are off put immediately, and that ends the conversation. But we also, if you're asking the question, we have to be able to hear, oh, maybe I did something offensive, because most of us don't want to be wrong. We don't want to. We don't want to have people saying we're racist or anything like that, So we immediately start to defend the question. But take a moment and say, well, what did I do? Explain to me, help me understand it, because I'm not from the group that you're from, so I don't know how it sounds to have this question thrown at me. So yeah, I definitely appreciate that you all are throwing that back out there, that we have to be able to hear things and not take offense to it. But at the same time, people who are throwing those questions out there, they have to know that sometimes the way that you ask the question might be a little bit difficult to hear, and maybe you need to learn how to restructure that question. So I'm going to throw another tough topic at you. How have you all been handling the Black Lives Matter movement? How has it impacted you in your job, your life, whatever? Or even some of the recent events. Go ahead, I'm sorry, Sage.
Yeah, well, I don't know much about the Black Lives Matter Black Lives Matter movement. I have heard that it is also Caucasians also run it to some degree, so I really didn't understand that. But I would like to find out more about it, and I would like to have them to take a look at a case and a situation that has happened to me out here. And this is one topic that I would like to speak about today. I would not want to interrupt anyone else who wants to respond to Black Lives Matter, but when we get a chance, I would really like to something very close to my heart and detrimental to me. And question two, what are some areas or issues of discrimination I've faced here in Phoenix, Arizona? Okay. Oh, so I may go.
Feel free to go ahead and talk about that. We can come back to Black Lives Matters as well.
Okay, folks. So my thing is this. I'll keep it as brief as I can, and I have a few notes. This is very, very serious situation here that I faced out here in Arizona, and the reason why I came here from New York. So the most harsh and brutal discrimination that I have and has been experiencing since I've been out here in Phoenix, Arizona, has been with the Department of the Arizona State, the DCS agency, Department of Child Safety Agency, and the foster care people. And this is in the cases of my custody of my grandchildren. See, I moved here to Arizona from New York to assist my daughters with their children. Both of my daughters have relocated to Arizona from New York for better economic and social opportunities and other little personal issues and things like that of coming across folks in Facebook and things like that. I won't get into all of the details, but I will focus on the most recent judgment as it was directly influenced by my time here at GCC. So you see, my youngest daughter, in the strains of her own personal trials, she voluntarily put her two daughters, Kayla Simone, who was 7 at the time, and Aaliyah Eileen, who was 2 years old. They were living a dysfunctional family unit, and she was going from here and there and here and there. And this has been a 7-year run with her, with me trying to keep up with her and the children. And she always wanted to venture out on her own and then come back and so forth and so on. So the thing that happened, with her dysfunctional family unit, the major cause of her decision, she turned them over to the Department of Child Care thing. There was no abuse. There was no, anything of that, any of those natures going on. And I was the primary caretaker, and I was raising the children from birth in New York. So that's how it came out here. But anyway, although I was available, my daughter's mental state rejected my positive assistance and positive influences to be helpful to her. And so she made that decision, and I didn't even know this was going to happen. But I will never forget the look on my granddaughter's face when she and her baby sister was taken by child services. After even the social worker who came to pick them up, stayed there with my daughter for 4 hours and tried to convince her not to do this. This wasn't a good choice in his eyesight. But nonetheless, she was, and she's bipolar, she was out of her mind mentally. And so my grandbaby just ran to me, the oldest one. She was with me since birth, and she was 7 at the time. She just ran in the bathroom and she said, Greggy. She called me Greg. She said, Greggy, please take me. Please don't let this happen. Her last words to me was, please take me with you so that I can live happily ever after, because that was what she had experienced with us in New York. So at that time, my living situation and financial situation became very unstable. And the trials of my daughter's mental condition at that time made it impossible to stay with her and the children all the time. So eventually, after she sent the children away, I ended up in a homeless services place due to adult abuse and all sorts of things. And eventually, they took me in, and I ended up at a residence right down the block from GCC campus. Okay. And as I was going through my, difficulties there, the staff and a lot of the, good friends there recommended that I consider coming to GCC for a brand new start in work training and education, because I worked in many city agencies and so on and so forth for years, but I didn't only graduated from college. So anyway, so that's what I did. During my employment as a maintenance worker here, cleaning the bathrooms on the campus, I worked the graveyard shift, and I took full-time classes in the morning, afternoons, and evenings. So while this was going on, my intentions were to establish a firm financial setting to get my grandchildren. I eventually received off-campus housing right across the street where I still live now. I have a B average, and I've been a student ambassador for the past year and a half. But the most telling horror occurred during the Christmas intercession, I think of 2018, when the campus was closed. My life was surrounded around GCC only, because this was my only respite. I stayed here day and night, and in between, I studied at the library and here in High Tech 2, where I am currently at it now, and received support with my assignments and homeworks and so on and so forth. So I was here around the clock. I only went across the street to sleep and grab food. And it was a very trying time. I was still working the maintenance at night when we were in the Christmas holiday, we were closed. I have no Wi-Fi or internet. I didn't have computers then and all that stuff. And so I only communicated with them through my phone and emails. And so my phone was displaced. It was just a very trying time for me. I was battle fatigued, with the whole thing. And And so what they did, they would only, they only contacted me by phone. So what happened was that during that holiday, now I spoke to the case manager November the 30th, and I asked him what was the the conclusion coming, because I had an exemplary home study, and GCC faculty and staff gave me the character reference letters that would make one want to weep. Okay, and they had all of those things, and so anyway, over that time, the little short time, my grandchildren, they rescinded, they awarded me, and they changed the decision, claiming that they were unable to contact me. All of this happened within a 48 to 72 hour or a few days. The caseworker stated that I was inconsistent based on false testimonies given by foster parents who were then trying to adopt my children, and the testimony of the white couple and their consistent interruptions in all of the exchanges with my granddaughters for all of the months that I was working, and met with no positive response with them. I cried out to any and anyone who would listen, and numerous wonderful staff and faculty members would try to aid me in every way they could, including Professor Leslie Knatzbich in theater, Professor Douglas Nottingham, Professor David Nichols, Tina LeBron. I was in her class for a family class. She would give me hugs. She would have me come to her office to sit and talk with me and help me get through it. So many more. Librarian Alexandra have drove me all the way to Mesa to hearings, and I mean, it was just an awful situation. My grandchildren, and also along with Alyssa McKinney, and my supervisor, my assistant supervisor, Jesse Leach, all of them I would talk to, was in such despair, and they gave me the strength to keep going on, to stay in school, Sage, continue working, and so on and so forth. So anyway, so the thing is that there, since that time period in like Mother's Day was the last time that I had any contact with my grandchildren, from Mother's Day of 2018 to this date. My plans are still clear. I will still establish myself and my credibility. I will still have available resources, morally and financially and legally, to get custody of my grandchildren. I don't know what state, what section it's in now, but it was horrifying to me, and I've been healing only here at GCC from this situation. This is a high discriminative case. I still plan to raise my grandchildren and continue my education and my interests and my background. And the thing is that the most painful part of this racist behavior was the consistently violent, arrogant behavior that I was subject to in every stage of my relationship with the Bureau of Child Services and the courts in the state of Arizona. I will quote only one scene where I traveled by bus from New York City at one time to attend another my daughter's case, and I was not even allowed
Not to cut you off, Sage, but I definitely want to move us forward.
I just have a few more things to say about it, because I want everyone to know that they're caseworkers, they're managers, they're disrespectful. They have my children. They've never given me. They've never even allowed me to have visitations with my children, or they didn't have court-ordered phone calls. So it's just been a fiasco. And I want everyone here at GCC to know, and how much I've been hurting, that my grandchildren are out of my life, and I'm just here still trying to get relief and fight this battle with this agency, and there are others like me as well. Okay, so I haven't seen my grandchildren in 3 years.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. But just to kind of put that into perspective, is that outside of race, or even just having to deal with race. We have a whole lot of other things that we have to deal with on top of that.
That's my point. But
Mhm.
this is directly related to to this topic, and this is a huge
Right.
discrimination because my children are snatched away from me, and they're in favor of white couples adopting our children, and it's a
So that
major
means that we
epidemic.
have to face the racism that we have in our criminal justice system, and we have to fix those things,
Well,
because
yes,
they're going to impact us by more than just losing children. There are so many of us that lose tons of people in our families.
that's not lightweight, my darling,
Right. It
because
is
the
not.
privilege. Because let me say this last thing in closing, if you will allow me to.
Go for it,
The
as long as you make it
privilege,
short.
I shall. The privilege have found a less expensive way to adopt through the Department of the Child Safety, DCS, and foster care. When our African American children already are suffering, okay, in a lot of areas, and the areas that we are speaking of today, okay, a lot of the Black families are having a hard time raising the children because of poverty and because of discrimination and
Hmm.
supremacy. Okay, so it devastates the families and the children. This is a growing trend, one that I have personally experienced, and I'm also aware of others going through this same traumatic situation. So our
Right.
children are being taken away in droves and high counts. Okay,
And
sweetheart?
part of that, and I guess just to bring that back, is that racism is not one thing. It's connected to so many different things that make it difficult for us to keep our families together. You know, we
And
have
no shit.
racism in our education system, we have
Mm-hmm.
racism in our economic system, in our political system. All of these different systems are not operating separate from one another. They are operating together. And when they do operate together, they make situations difficult for people who look like us, right? And when we say anything about them, we also have to combat this entire stereotype that we have bad attitudes because we
That's
speak
correct.
up for our rights. So,
That's correct. Now, all of them were
in saying
violated.
that though,
Mm-hmm.
are there what is one thing that you don't want to ever hear someone say to you again? If
Oh, I
anybody's
can
listening
tell
to
you.
this conversation, what is
I can.
one thing that you would not want them to
The
say to
one
you?
thing I never want to hear anymore, sweetheart, is objection, 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 denied, denied, denied. I never would. I could live without it.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Who else? One thing, if you could leave this conversation, anybody you want them leaving this conversation with one idea, what is one thing that you would not want them to leave without knowing, that you never want to hear again?
I think another thing would be the comment, get over it. You know, they're only 3 words, but they're really powerful. And when that is said, it feels like it really discredits your experience and where you're coming from and who you are as a person. I think it's helpful for people to really try to understand where people are coming from and what their truth is, as opposed to just saying, get over it. It feels really dismissive. And I think instead of just dismissing people, if you try to take the time to really understand where that person might be coming from and practicing a little bit more empathy and really kind of understanding what it might be like to be in that person's position or their shoes.
Yeah, I want to add 3 more words, Tanisha. As a Black person, people who say, well, I don't care, it doesn't really affect me. I don't know much about the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm not involved because, nothing's happened to me. And I really feel like it's not just our movement. When we
Mm.
witnessed the civil rights movement, it wasn't just Black people who had been discriminated against in the streets marching and protesting. It was everybody that cared about that. And so I feel like I don't ever want to hear anybody say, I don't care, it doesn't affect me, because it does, and it will.
I think for me, like there's so many, I guess basically just negative comments of basically that gives us self-doubt that make us think that we can't do what people think is impossible for us. Like that stuff that like will bring us down emotionally if we keep hearing it and starts to believe it. Like I feel like if you hear it enough, like sometimes like our mental strength is not that strong, and we start to believe it, and we start to like doubt our own existence, and it's a sad thing. Like basically, you have to die yourself because like you start believing the doubt of what everybody is telling you. Like you can't make it in school, you can't basically do this, or you just can't. I guess like the word can't basically is a major one because you want something to build you up. You want basically that support, like that unity, like that encouragement. So like basically any words that are self-doubt, I wish we can basically remove that from basically people's vocabulary because like why are we trying to bring others down? I feel we should basically bring them up and not tear them down. Like what did that person do to you that makes you want to tear them down and basically like make them doubt themselves and not let them realize their full potential? I think we should let basically like people of all races like realize their potential because sometimes like we don't get that enough. We don't get that encouragement. We don't get that support. We don't get that love that we need to basically go on to strive on. And we just basically fall down or we just let the negativity bring us down. And it's a sad thing.
Thank you.
For me, one thing that I don't want anybody ever say to me is the fact that it's come to the same line as get over, but it's more like yeah, you're blaming everybody else about yourself. You know, like it's like I look like living back in Africa. I was very, very competitive, and I'm still am. And when I'm competing, and I know I'm the best, yet I still don't get the same position or the same respect as anybody else would have. So you can't tell me like, like I have no one else to blame but myself when I'm not being discriminated against myself because how I look. Because to me, it's my name is Bienfe first before I'm black. You know, identify me by my name before identify me by my race. Get to know me as a person before you identify me about my height, my gender, anything else. Get to know me about first. So to me, as that's the one thing like I don't want anybody ever told me is like, um, honestly, like to blame myself, to blame why am I black? You know, why did you choose? I did not choose this. I did not choose. I was given to me, and I have to embrace who I am. So does everybody else have? And I think like primarily I hear these comments from both sides of the aisle. Sometimes people, our own people will say, "Hey, you know, we have our own self to blame," and then you have the other people say, "No, you guys have your own self to blame." But there's a thin line between personal character and personal decision, and
Yes.
overall the system that has been designed to oppress us based on how we look and just the idea that you're a black person holding a certain position, you should not be there. Like how many years you've been working here? Like it's one of those things that I really dislike when anybody told me that. Like I'll walk away from you and I don't want to engage.
Okay.
So.
Oh, anybody else before I wrap us up?
I can chime in.
Go for it.
I guess just kind of like what everybody else has been saying. I just never really want to hear, negative stereotypes or assumptions about where I come from and my culture. With everything in the media, a lot of the stereotypes in Africa, people being poor and all that. That's something that I've always had to face, and so it's something that I never really want to hear. I'd rather have people first, understand, kind of like what they were saying, understand where I come from, my experiences, and then make assumptions based on that. But even then, instead of assumptions, again, just trying to understand me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. As I'm wrapping us up, I just want to say one of the things I would never want to hear anyone say to me, and this is from a professional perspective, is that I'm becoming aggressive because I disagree with them. That happens a lot, and I'm talking about fellow colleagues, both here and afar. I've worked at a number of institutions, but if you happen to speak about something that may be a different idea from someone else, or you happen to say or you disagree with what someone has said, then you're automatically assumed to be the aggressor and you make the situation uncomfortable. And I've heard that a number of times, including this academic year. So I would never want to hear that again. I would want people to take a moment to understand a different perspective. But I want to thank you all for being open and honest. And for those people that are listening, as you can see, we have so many different passions that could take over our lives, and not just the Blackness that impacts us, but that compounds and adds on, that it makes it difficult sometimes for us to process a lot of the things that happen. You know, I know we didn't get to fully talk about the Black Lives Matter movement, but that's just one more thing to add on to the plate that we have to think about. So as you leave from this session today, take in a lot of the things that you've heard, reflect on those things, and consider the things that you might say or do to people who may not look like you. You know, we're not just talking about Black people here. These things can apply across the spectrum, because when we think of race, we typically just think of Black, but they impact all of us. So I thank you all for being open and honest and allowing people into your lives. Thank you all for sharing with us. And we can talk about this more. Hopefully we'll have more sessions in the future where we can continue the conversation. But I just want to thank you all, to remind all the people who are listening that we will be sending out a survey, and please take time to share, to fill out that survey and give us your honest feedback. And we hope that we see you at the next session. So thank you all. Thank you for listening. Thank you all for being here and sharing your stories with us. We appreciate you so much.